Welcome to the My Comic Shop History Christmas Special. I am your host once again, Anthony Desiato. 6 months ago, a comic book shop in Scarsdale, New York called Alternate Realities went up to that big back issue bin in the sky when it closed after 23 years. During Season 1 of this podcast, we relived the highs and lows of Alternate Realities as we bid the store a fond and final farewell. Now, 6 months later, we're back for this special holiday installment in which we'll answer the questions raised in the first season of the podcast. Does our community still gather for weekly dinners? Did the store's former owner ever find the peace he was looking for? And, most importantly, where do the comic shop guys go when the comic shop is gone? I'm joined today by three all-star guests. To my right, we have Mr. Sean McInerney, a longtime former employee of the store and guest on episode 2 of the podcast. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Right across from me, we have Tom Darby, a.k.a. Tomo, another former worker at the store and guest on episode 6.
How's it going, everybody?
And on the other side of the table, we have the legendary Rich Roney, friend of the store and a person so honored, so revered within our group that we all fight for the Rich Roney seat when we go out to dinner. Today, all three of us have the Rich Roney seat, and all of the listeners at home have the Rich Roney seat. Rich, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me.
Just to start, I think we should set the scene a little bit and explain where we are and when we're doing this. So it's a little bit before Christmas. It's about a week and a half before Christmas. And we are once again in a comic book shop, though, of course, sadly, it's not Alternate Realities. Sean, where are we?
We're at the Spider's Web, owned by a former customer of Alternate Realities, Paul, who is kind enough to let us come in and record partially while the store is still open.
And if I may add, this is one of the most elegant stores I've been in. It's clean. It's got phenomenal inventory in stock. And Paul, thank you for your graciousness.
Yeah, we really do want to thank Paul for taking us in. I feel like we've been comic shop refugees over the past 6 months, so we really do want to thank Paul for taking us in. And if anyone hasn't been to the Spider's Web, we've talked about it a lot over the course of the podcast, but if anyone hasn't checked it out and they're in the area, they really should. Sean, I know this is now your weekly go-to spot, and a little bit later, I really want to talk about that a lot, because I think that's a big piece of, what's going on here is the fact that, we all have had to, find other places and check out other shops, so I definitely want to talk about that. And to follow up on what you were saying, Sean, the store is still open. It's a Sunday, it's pretty quiet, but if listeners hear any customers in the background or a phone ringing or anything like that, just the atmosphere of a live comic shop. I guess a good place to start is where we left off last time. So I recorded the finale of the first season of this podcast on the Friday, right before the true end of Alternate Realities. And Steve Odo, the store's owner, Bill Mayo, who we'll talk about, who helped out a lot with the final the move out of the store. So Steve, Bill, and myself, we recorded that final podcast on that Friday, and we were there until about midnight. And Bill and I had spent that day hauling long boxes of trades and comics from the store to the warehouse. But when we left that Friday night, it still more or less looked like Alternate Realities. Again, a lot of stuff had been cleared out. It was in even more disarray than normal, but it still looked like the store. When I came back less than 24 hours later, it didn't look like the store anymore. And Rich, I think you had a similar reaction as I did.
Two thoughts went through my mind when I arrived at about 5:15 or 5:30 that Saturday night. To give 30 seconds of history, I ditched my nephew, who was graduated high school. They were having a big party for him. I kind of went up, shook his hand, gave him an envelope, and said, I got to get down for this final dinner at AR. First and foremost, I was just so stunned at how much stuff had been removed, because I was so used to that place being so dense and so full of stock and boxes and shelving and product. It staggered my mind how much stuff had been pulled out and how open and vacuous it looked. But then also, emotionally, I was kind of stunned because the reality of the end really hit me like a mountain landed on me. And Anthony, you had said in one of the prior podcasts that it was not dissimilar, like after your parents sold the house in which you grew up, that you just kind of walked around. That was the same that evening. It just, intellectually, physically, sensory-wise, it just slammed me on all levels. So I was really surprised at how much product had been moved out and how just in disarray it looked.
Yeah, Tom and Sean, I want to toss it to you at that point because I know that both of you were present during that Saturday. There was a really large group of guys who came in to really help out. So I'll toss it to Tom first. I mean, I guess what was your experience that day? What did you do there?
I rolled up that Saturday and I saw a ton of people just working to break down the fixtures, box up books, merchandise, whatever it was. And again, it was this hodgepodge of people. Employees, some customers. So it was just a ton of us just cleaning up, trying to move stuff like, furniture wise into, Steve's truck. I remember Steve yelling at us about putting the desk in the automobile, saying that it wouldn't fit. But I think it was Sean that figured out that, we can open up, the window in the back of the trunk and it would fit perfectly.
That's what a doctorate gets you right there. That's
There you
higher
go.
level thinking.
So so that worked out. So yeah, it was a ton of us just, working our asses off, trying to get the store ready.
I got to the store that last Saturday later than some of the other people because I was working at the summer camp I work at. And I got there around lunchtime and stepped into what was already sort of like a shell of a store, but still felt a little bit like alternate realities. And just immediately joined Brian ripping down the slat wall and knocking the nails out of it and stacking it up. And it really was. It was filled with customers and with employees. And it was nice to see the amount of support that came in because I think without that, there's no way that store would have gotten emptied out in time. But it was also sort of, like Rich said, I left that night.
Emotionally hurt.
Yeah, it's like you don't want to compare it to losing an actual person, but it is like a loss. It's closing a chapter in your life, and it was difficult to see a store that you hung out in for hours. During store hours, coming in and hanging out after store hours, a familiarity in a clubhouse just not there anymore. And seeing all the memories just not there. Pictures on the wall, pictures in the bathroom. All just empty.
Yeah, I mean, this whole idea of what we feel, a few months out, both on a practical level, how we've been affected, and then also on an emotional level. I mean, I really want to talk about that a lot. But Sean, you hit on something there that I actually had in my notes here I wanted to bring up. And again, like you said, right, it's certainly not like losing a loved one. And I don't want anyone to think that we feel otherwise. I mean, we know that it's a store, but nevertheless, a store that meant a lot to us. And I was kind of curious because, again, sometimes when you lose a loved one, it can happen in a couple of ways. It could be, a sudden tragedy, or it can be something longer and more drawn out. And I guess there are arguments on either side as to, what's better. In this case, Steve announced the end of alternate realities at the beginning of February, and then it closed up for good at the end of June. So there were 5 solid months of us trying to empty it out and talking about it and dealing with all of it. To all of you guys, I mean, would it have been easier if we just got or just saw a Facebook post from Steve one day that's like, oh, there was a fire, the store's gone?
Well, hey, if I could interrupt, it was also more challenging because there was a theory he might sell it, then he wasn't going to sell it. And the signs that had been posted kind of tugged us back and forth emotionally.
It's a good thing Steve's not a doctor. That'd be terrible. You're dying. A few months later, you might live.
The bedside manner is not there. But, if you think of the stages of grief and stuff, I felt not only did I go through it, but I was able to bear witness to some of the customers going through it in that time from when he first announced the closing to when it actually did close. And Rich is right. It was a roller coaster of there's hope. We've got a buyer. We're going to keep it. We're going to stay open. We're not going anywhere. And then 2 days later, pack your bags, everybody. We're out of here. Say goodbye. And I'll never forget there was a Wednesday where I came in and I was still sort of in that denial stage. I still, I worked at Alternate Realities for I don't even know how long, well over 10 years. And in that time, I've heard Steve say we were closing a number of times, enough to count on both my hands. So I didn't quite believe it. But when I walked in this one Wednesday, Brian Claudio was there, and he embodied that stage of just anger and bargaining, and he was just ripping into Steve and throwing out these ideas of, well, can't you try this? Can't you do that? What the hell's wrong with you? Why are you doing this? And it was a little off-putting to see just how visceral a reaction he was having to this announcement, but it still didn't feel real. until the night we had a final store dinner, and then it really hit home, to the point where I still don't really drive by it unless I have to.
It's speaking of driving by, I mean, I still use the dry cleaner two shops down in that same shopping plaza, and occasionally I'll stop in the deli too if I'm there, and it's eerie just seeing that empty store with the for rent sign. So 6 months and still no new occupant. But it kind of breaks your heart a little bit every time you drive by and it's empty. Have you driven by, Tom?
Yeah, definitely. The only reason why I'm there, I go see Louie. If I'm on Central Avenue, I want something to eat, I do go to the deli, and I can't help but look into the empty store and see what's not there. Our clubhouse used to be there. Now it's just this vacant space. It's very sad.
I want to follow up on a note with Tom. So, as many listeners probably know, Facebook has this feature now where sometimes you log in and they'll show you a post that you put up, X number of years ago, and they'll ask you if you want to share that memory. So, just the other day, there was a memory of mine that it asked if I wanted to share, and it was a picture from our last white collar sale, which we've talked about in previous episodes when actually all four of us would wear basically like vests and fedoras, and we'd have these big sales at Alternate Realities. But when I originally posted that picture, it was the third and final white collar sale, and Tom, you said, and I quote, "I'm so glad this is the last white collar sale, then I'll really be happy. Or maybe the fire marshal will shut us down. That would be a great finale." So I'll ask the question again, if the store had just been gone and we didn't have this long drawn out goodbye, would you have preferred that, or do you think it went the way it should go?
What do you mean, like the fire marshal shutting it down for good, or what?
Or a fire itself, or whatever? Just like, as opposed to having this long drawn out farewell, if the store just one day just hadn't been there, whether it blew up or burned or got shut down.
I guess there's no real best answer for it.
But I know one of your questions is what's changed. I think what's phenomenally changed is our friendships have, if anything, are probably stronger. We're now making more of an effort to get together periodically.
I think just to piggyback on that, I think the big change, though, is while we do still make an effort to get together, and there's usually something going on every weekend in some variation of the group, it's certainly not as easy as it used to be, where we would just show up and over the course of the hours from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock, we saw who was building in the store, and then that dictated how big the reservation would be that we would make. And now it's far more planned and organized, and scheduled. And it does have to be because of what's happened. I mean, Anthony, you tried to organize a Thanksgiving dinner with not a lot of responses.
Yeah, tried being the key word.
And yet we still had a big turnout, given that nobody was responding to it, but everybody showed up for it. So
yeah, the procedure's been a little different. So I created a closed Facebook group just for the core group, and people have been using it to a certain extent, not as much as I would have liked. And yeah, Sean, I tried to organize the Thanksgiving dinner through that, and asked for restaurant recommendations, and crickets. And then thankfully, a couple days beforehand, you contacted people via text and email, and we were able to pull it together. So it's a little bit different. Rich, I think it's a little tricky because you're not on Facebook, yet you're often the linchpin of these dinners. People will gather when you're in. So I don't know. I think we might have to get you on Facebook.
It's not Russian.
This is actually not really a podcast so much as an intervention. And surprise, we're getting you on Facebook.
I do feel like the dinners, on average, they've been more or less as frequent as we used to have them. Because I feel like, Rich, you're still coming in more or less every other week.
Anthony, could you please tell the story the one time when you had a dream and you had been watching The Walking Dead and all that stuff, and you had a dream where you dreamt that I called and said, "Hey, I don't think I can make it in." And you said, "Rich..."
Oh, that's right. When you were starting that, I'm like, what is he talking about? But I remember now. And yeah, in the dream, you're like, I don't think I'm going to make it in. And I'm like, Rich, it's the apocalypse. Nobody's making it in. But I mean, even if it's slowed down a little bit, we're still getting together. And I do think that, the gatherings on average have been larger because it is the only opportunity for people to get together.
We don't have that informal stuff. It's much more formal and attendance and structured. I think the turnouts are bigger because we don't have the meeting place, the casual meeting place just to hang out.
Yeah, I mean, do you guys like the bigger gatherings? You prefer smaller? What do you guys feel?
I always get amazed just looking at the turnout and seeing how a brick and mortar comic book store has facilitated such a camaraderie and friendship amongst so many people, which is great. To coin Rich's term, like friendship and fun, right? But
speaking of that, so with the movie rating system, a PG-13 movie is allowed one F-bomb, and if it goes over that, then they're into R rating territory. Rich, I think we got to impose that same rule on you. So you get one friendship and fun.
Now I feel even more pressure.
So, what about you, Tom? I mean, do you like this new iteration, or did you prefer it the way it was before?
To be very, very honest, I hate these bigger gatherings. I really, really do.
How come?
For several reasons. And again, my reasons, they're sensible to me, but other people might feel differently about them, which, who gives a shit?
Fair enough.
What I feel like there's a lot lost in these bigger gatherings because when there's like 20 people, 15 people, you really are stuck with the person that you're sitting next to.
This doesn't apply to the broader AR community, but amongst the four of us, I know I'm making more of an effort to speak with you guys through telephone calls on a more frequent basis than I did.
To.
Yeah, so I do think in some ways our friendships, does that count as the... Our friendship?
I think it's only if it's that you've cultivated great friendship and fun.
How does that quote go again?
I feel like this is a quintessential first world problem. It's like our dinners are too big and we don't get to talk to each other
Well,
enough.
it's the only time we can talk about them because, I'm not going to any more big gatherings unless if I have to.
I mean, overall, it's like I definitely get what you're saying. When we do have the large group, you are limited to the people who you're sitting next to. But I don't know. I mean, maybe it just makes the seating arrangement, you got to be a little more strategic. Maybe we could rotate. Maybe we could do, that would be interesting, actually, if we rotated seats at a certain point in the dinner.
Seats?
Not assigned seats, but at a certain point, you just kind of flip a little bit so you get to talk to different people. That might be an idea. Would you come then?
Probably not.
No.
Probably not.
all right.
But that's not a bad idea.
I mean, but anyway, to answer that larger question, I mean, the dinners have continued, which is really nice. And I know that was something that we were all always concerned about. It's like, would it still happen? So it does, and I think that is a testament to, these bonds that have been forged that extend beyond the walls of the store, as we hoped and predicted, and happy to report that that is actually the case.
I'm happy to report that if you hear that little squeak in the background, that's actually from the store. That's the old spinner rack from Alternate Realities, currently in use at Spider's Web.
Not only the spinner rack, I meant to mention this at the top of the show. We are sitting on chairs that were once in Alternate Realities, so it feels like we're home.
Possibly the ones we recorded during season 1.
Maybe.
Now, you did ask, were there things we miss? One thing I don't miss is the work effort Sean and I went through to remove dead mice from the store.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up. So
You've got a dead mouse that you want to get rid of?
well, it's sort of at work the other week. There was this foul odor that was emanating from the vent. And everyone was like, what is that? What could that be? And I was thinking to myself, I've smelled this before. And I was like, you know what? As gross as it was like, it reminds me of Alternate. So I didn't mind it so much.
Oh, wow. What a memory to have.
Yeah, you guys worked hard to get that mouse. Where was it?
It was wedged between the back issue bins and the bookcases. And we had to dismantle before the store opened. You got in
I got there
7
about,
or 8?
No. I think I got there about 8 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
And we were fearful. We didn't know where it was because this thing had languished for like a month. And I remember that my sister-in-law brought the kids in the day before, and a lot of people were like, "Ugh, what's that odor?" So finally, Sean and I resolved. We said, "Look, I'm going to come in one Saturday. We'll both get there at 8 o'clock." But dismantling the shelves, taking shelving units apart, because all the shelves were screwed together, just so one would never fall over and injure a person. So we invested probably a good 2.5 hours tracking this thing down. You brought special gloves, latex gloves, and all that stuff.
Yeah, I wasn't touching that. It was disgusting.
It was disgusting.
It was just a terribly petrified, disgusting mouse just wedged back there. But we managed to get it out, thrown out, and everything put back together before the store opened at 11. which was great, and it stopped smelling, which was...
And you bleached the shit out of it, right?
Bleached the shit. Well, I feel like I was the only person in that store who ever bought like bleach or
hand soap in a couple times.
Hand soap, yes, but like the heavy duty like carpet cleaners. When Steve's dog was coming in all the time and urinating and shitting all over the place, it disgusted me. And I love animals and I love dogs, but I was disgusted because Steve would just be like, just throw some paper towels on it and take some of those extra Louis napkins and throw them on top and we'll move on. So I kept buying all of this carpet cleaner and bleach and all this stuff. So yeah, I threw some of that on there.
I give you the utmost credit for both of you guys for what you did with the mouse, and you, Sean, because you were the only one who really cleaned. Like Tom, you and I, we did bring in soap because that one bar of soap,
that nasty
was
hand
disgusting,
soap.
and I hated using that. I was like, I feel dirtier after washing my hands with this bar of soap, and it would have to be like nothing before he would put out a new one.
And never liquid soap. I never understood. We couldn't just have liquid soap. It's so much easier and less gross. It sat in that disgusting soap holder. Yeah. It was all scummy and it was horrible. There's nothing enticing about wanting to clean your hands.
So we can say that condition at the store were pretty shitty, sanitation wise.
So before we move on, just one last note about the dinners. The big dinner, we had our last supper with an AR at the end. That last Saturday,
27th.
Yeah, that's right, the 27th, and then the store closed for good a couple days after that. We did it at Venetian Delight, which has been our go-to pizza spot on Central Avenue, and we had over 40 people there. Tom, you must have hated it.
Yeah.
It was the worst, right?
It wasn't great, but I mean, when he pardoned, Doug, and apparently I was mentioned, but I was in the bathroom, so
yeah. So this is one of the things I wanted to mention. There were, it was nice to see such a large group assemble, and I feel like the mood, while there was sadness, I mean, I think overall it was celebratory. We were all, remembering the store and just kind of wanting to have this last, blowout dinner.
It was really an Irish wake. You're assembled by kind of a bad incident, but there was a lot of laughter, a lot of smiles, a lot of happiness. So it really was an Irish wake. I mean, many of us, we had a lot of jokes, a lot of good laughter. Bill, who's the heart and soul of AR, so many people got together, but it was a sad occasion that caused us to get together. But
it was, and it was interesting too because people like Heitner came in and out so quick, but everybody made a point of at least stopping by and paying respects. It was really, as sad as it was a very nice night, and it was a nice send-off for the store.
Casey came up. We haven't seen him in years.
And got a hug from Steve.
Yeah, so there were a number of things that happened that I think were really interesting. I feel like, again, Steve's mood, for those who have heard the finale of season 1 of this, there was a lot of emotion shared during that final recording, and I feel like Steve experienced like a genuine catharsis, and he let some stuff out. There was crying. It was really kind of intense, and I feel like that carried over because there were a number of moments throughout the dinner where Steve was maybe a little bit out of character.
But you know what? Steve is a curmudgeon. He's very crusty. Clearly, he's got strong opinions, as you guys spoke about in your first podcast. He'll comment those things about people that screwed him over and load that into the database. But he is really one of the most generous. I was annoyed because Anthony and I worked real carefully. We figured, you know what? Here's the entrees we're going to get. Here's how we're going to handle this. Works out to about $30 a head. And before I knew it, Steve picked up the check for the whole thing.
And along similar lines, and going back to what Tom had said, so one of the big moments of the night, and we talked about this in episode 5, which was the one that featured Doug Desher. And Rich, as you mentioned, Steve would often leave notes in people's files when they had wronged him. And one of the notes in Doug's file was that Doug was the worst offender in store history because he had left Steve with a number of items that he had ordered and then decided not to purchase. So the note in his file read, worst offender in store history, which Tom reminded Doug pretty much any chance he got. But during that last supper, there came a moment where Steve, kind of gathered everybody around, and he specifically called out you, Tom, but I don't know where you were.
Yeah, I was in the bathroom and I missed it. I was
big
so
moment.
disappointed.
Yeah,
so disappointed.
Where Steve, in front of everybody, he pardoned Doug. Doug is no longer the worst offender in the store history. So that was a nice moment.
But then Gary got the mantle.
Yeah, the person who, it seemed like might buy the store at one point and then backed out. He is now officially the worst offender in store history. But that was a great moment. Another great moment, Rich, was you made some remarks. You gave a little toast. And it was great because it was so funny because at the end of it, you're like, Bill, Bill is the heart and soul of this store. Bill, do you want to say anything? And Bill goes, maybe later. And never said anything. But do you remember the gist of what you conveyed to the group? It was very nice.
I do remember thanking Steve for his perseverance and his dedication, because all of our friendships emanated from him opening that store. And I remember thanking him for all of his perseverance and dedication. And I got to say, in many respects, the AR community had never been stronger. The fact that 40 people showed up.
I wasn't there for the final night where the sign came down. I don't think any of you guys were as well, right? But I saw I think Phil was there. He took pictures. A few of the guys took pictures. Does anyone know where the sign ended up?
I think Steve has it.
Oh.
I think Steve took the sign home. I think Bill put it in his car and took it home.
You might see it on eBay soon.
Well, how's that for a segue? So when I announced that we were doing this podcast, I put the call out there on Facebook and Twitter. Does anyone have any questions, anything they want us to talk about in particular? And not surprisingly, one of the first things that came up was, what's Steve up to these days?
I think he's happier. I mean, from the times I've seen him, I think he's much happier. He's less stressed, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely attest to that. I mean, I'll be honest, I can't say I really had like that much contact with him. I mean, it's really only been when I've seen him at one of the dinners, and he's come to a good bunch of them. And he does seem less burdened. I mean, truly. And, he does seem to be enjoying himself, going through everything and listing them slowly on eBay. So, again, for the did he ever find, I don't know if peace is the right word, but he definitely seems happier and less burdened. I think it's very fair to say. So again, Steve's on eBay. He's super Odo. Items are getting up there slowly but surely. But the last thing I want to bring up is, because you kind of hit on this before, Sean, that over the summer you were picking up things that Steve had ordered for you prior to the store closing, that arrived after the store closed.
Yep.
So you would go to the warehouse and pick that up. What was that like?
Uncomfortable. Not that, just because it's you. I would show up. I would call him and say, "Hey, I'm outside," and he would come out with the statue or the trade or whatever, and I would give him cash, and he would give me the stuff, and it was like doing like a drug deal. I felt,
but so you didn't actually go in?
No, this is the thing. There were days where it was like a drug deal, and I was outside, and it was a quick exchange. And I felt dirty. I felt like, oh, this is all this for a trade. But then there were days where he'd be like, you got to come in. You got to see the work I did. So he did. He would take me around. He would show me the different units, show me all the stuff that he did work on. And then I would, go my way, wave goodbye to the Westies security people, and see you next week, guys. And that would be it.
So this young buck would show up with a wad of cash and disappear into a Westie's room with Steve for like 20, 25 minutes?
Yeah, about that, yeah. Yeah. You can imagine it was a little uncomfortable, a little
Come
awkward.
out smiling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, so aside from that, that kind of brings us to the last big piece of this is, again, on a practical side, as shoppers, as customers, what do we do now? Where do we go? Tom, I mean, I think you and I were probably the least affected by this because, I think it's fair to say neither one of us is, as avid a collector as we were before. I mean, are you going to any store on any regular basis now?
No, I mean, even before the store had closed, my collecting had dwindled a lot. I was just buying things out of habit. When the store finally closed, it was a reason to, just finally close the books on collecting comics, statues, and toys and collectibles. The store closing was sad, definitely. I'm missing my friends on a regular basis. But it was also good for me. I'm not buying stuff that I don't enjoy.
And we've heard, similar things from a number of guys in our group. I mean, Doug, for example, he said that he hasn't bought anything since the store closed, and he was pretty much done. Other guys, like Mike San Gregorio, I know he reads new stuff digitally, and then older stuff he rents from the library. So, there definitely have been people who it seems have just kind of stepped away from it. Others have gone elsewhere, and Sean, I'll toss that to you in a second. But I want to talk about a particular afternoon that Rich, Tom, and I spent together where we went to check out All Yeah Comics, which is a new store that opened in Harrison, New York. I mean, I have to say it's a really neat, clean, bright, well-lit store. I know they're geared a little bit more towards a younger audience. I know they really try to bring kids in. They do a lot of events. It was just kind of funny because we left there, and if we had a complaint, I guess it was that there wasn't that much stuff for us to look at. And I'm like, man, we just spent like this whole podcast and off the podcast as well complaining about how AR had too much stuff in it. And now we go to this new store like, oh, there's not enough. It's like, there's no pleasing us, basically.
And it felt kind of guilty or like I was violating a trust. It just felt eerie. Now,
But you didn't buy anything, so.
Actually, I think out of the four of us, I think Sean is the only one who's actually bought something there.
I am not only out of the four of us, I think almost out of everybody at the store, I'm the only person left regularly buying comics. And I buy my comics right here at the Spider's Web from Paul.
Actually, you've bought a couple of mine here.
I bought some books for Rich here too. Yeah. No, I buy regularly. I sort of transitioned out of AR. Actually, the month before it closed, it was a nice segue, just what was going on in the comic market at the time, with the companies Convergence and Marvel with their Secret Wars and stuff. That I transitioned to Spider's Web in June, and Paul has been great with my OCD tendencies with my books and stuff like that. He's been very patient, very generous.
Speaking of your OCD, I saw everyone's favorite curmudgeon, Jay Mizell, recently. And I asked if he had picked up any of Steve's former customers, and he said not really. But he was a little annoyed because he for some reason, Sean, I don't know what you or someone else told him, but he was under the impression you were going to start shopping at Jay's Comics. And I said to him, I was like, listen, you don't want Sean. No. I said he's too OCD, and you manhandle your books, so it won't work. Yeah, and I think he was okay with that.
I love Jay Mizell. But I don't think it would work. I think our friendship would suffer for it. So
now, one thing I have to ask you, and I busted Paul's chops about this when I had him on the business school episode. He does not bag his trade paperbacks. How do you handle that?
Well, I actually, prior to the store closing, I bought a tremendous amount of supplies that are currently in my attic. And in fact, I just bought more supplies from Steve. I'm still a customer of AR, if you can believe that. I just bought in bulk a whole bunch of bags and boards. My regular routine is it's very close to my work, actually, which has been nice. I'm able to get here within 10 or 15 minutes, which has been great. And so I'll come after work and buy my books, and then I usually stand by the back issues and bag my books, put them in the bag myself, and then I go home. And I've become that guy that we all teased.
How long do you usually stay when you come?
It depends on what I've got to do that day, but usually like anywhere from 15 to 25 minutes. It depends on the afternoon and what I've got to do. It's nice though. There are some days where a lot of the alternate reality refugees, former customers, will come in, and some of them are on the same schedule as I am, so I see them fairly weekly, which has been great just to keep some of those contacts. It's one of the biggest things I miss from the store, surprisingly enough, is that interaction with some of the customers. So it's nice that I still get to experience that with some of them.
Yeah. And Rich, what about you? What has your experience been like post AR as a customer?
So this past summer, after the store closed, we did a road trip. Phil, Mike San Gregorio, Sean, and I. We took a day. Phil charted out.
Tom, we weren't invited.
Apparently not.
Apparently we do exclude people from the store gatherings. We just didn't realize it.
You two both just got gunny sacked.
Totally.
I've been living in the gunny sack for years. It's fine.
We took a day and we went to about 4 shops in Connecticut, places that Phil really enjoyed and recommended to us.
Look, now, Tom, he's just going to talk all about all the things they did.
Yeah, you're cutting Rich anyway.
What everybody enjoyed. We didn't enjoy anything.
And that secret lunch that they had before.
Oh.
Yeah, I remember that.
Good story, Rich. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, we'll talk about that too.
No, I'm sorry, Rich. Continue.
I'm giving topics that will help this discussion.
Yeah.
So anyway,
what else did Phil like? Tell us.
So we the first place we went up, I think, was Sandy Hook. It was Comics Cave or something like that. It was at one time it was a train station. When we pulled into the place and we're getting ready to go in, and I'm hanging back just for a second with Mike and Phil, and I turn, and Anthony, you described this in the very first podcast.
Oh, now I know where this is going.
Okay. I blinked for a nanosecond, and when I turned back, Sean was like about 40 feet ahead of me. But his stride, his purpose, I mean, honest to God, he like stood up. He was an inch taller. His stride was like a foot longer. The speed and the purpose that he walked in there was just, it's everything you said in the first podcast about that dollar sale. He came in, he was like a force.
Yeah, that's my earliest memory of you, is just barreling, just making a beeline for those back issue bins. When you're on a mission, you cannot be stopped.
And he had such purpose and such drive.
I do have a mission. I like the hunt. I like to go in and look around, and I've got my list with me at all times. And
please, I think that's admirable. I was so impressed with your drive
probably
and
the
your
only
purpose.
person at this table, since they weren't
Your
invited,
purpose.
I think that's admirable.
So much for us, Tom.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But Anthony, it circled right back to what you described in the first podcast when you first met Sean.
Well, it's funny. So this is the official title for this is the My Comic Shop History Christmas Special, and it's called that kind of in honor of the tradition of British television of having a Christmas special. Though certainly we wish a happy holiday to anybody, regardless of whether they celebrate Christmas or not. And not that the title has really mattered much, because this hasn't been very holiday themed. But maybe we can turn that around a little bit. So this group that's assembled here, this group that ran the white collar sales, we call ourselves the Team. And Tom, you were the one who first gave us that nickname. How did that come about?
It just felt appropriate. There's no real rhyme or reason why. It sounded perfect.
There's an elegance in the simplicity. It's not the AR team. It's not anything. It's just the Team.
Yep.
That's it.
Stoic. He says a lot without actually saying anything.
That's right. I'm going to solve
Better.
Rich's game here a little bit, because when I first told Rich that we were going to have the Team reunite for the podcast, do you remember the first thing you said to me? You were like, well, I could be on a number of teams. I could be on the business team with Phil and Mike. I could be on the team with you guys. So, I don't know.
Mike would love that, though. You know that.
But I think you latched onto the fact that I was talking about the team, right?
The more important one.
Comment, Rich.
Yep.
Please.
Awkwardness.
I am so grateful you guys included me in this team. And listen, I'm twice the age of you guys. The mere fact that you guys are willing to hang out with me is awesome, and I appreciate it so much.
But you're more than just a member of the team. You are our captain. Is that a position you relish, you accept, or is that more of like forced upon you and you're the reluctant captain?
I'm not a leader, You guys have been good to me, but I think you guys make the decisions and I tag along.
Do you agree with that, Tom? Because I think you were the one who said Rich is our captain.
I do, but
I think he's giving me more of an honorarium.
The reason why I do say that, because I hold Rich in high regard, in the highest regard. I think we all do too, so...
We do all hold Rich in the highest regard, and not just the people at this table. I mean, Rich, you talked about how your routine has changed, and you don't have a place to hang out in between lunch and dinner now that the store's gone. At least one person who's not at this table has offered to host you at his
several
place.
occasions.
I mean, that's really nice.
You guys have been good. You guys have been good to me.
He's also, not only has he offered, I mean, this is interesting, though. Not only has he offered to host you in between lunch and dinner, I mean, he's offered to put you up in a hotel after dinner in case you don't feel like driving back.
It's tremendously gracious.
In fact, it's something he and I were talking about earlier today. You've got a big birthday coming up this year.
Yep.
And
the big 6-0.
One of the ideas that was tossed around as part of a gift was to get a hotel room so you didn't have to drive back. So you would have your own place to stay, and then we could all go out to dinner, and you could have, like we did for my last night, you would be chauffeured around and then dropped off at your hotel, and you could leave whenever you wanted to the next day. So.
Would you take the group up on that?
I don't know. You guys know how I don't like to be pushed into a corner, and I procrastinate to the nth degree. It's it's very gracious, but I haven't thought that far ahead. But getting back to the team,
Getting back to the friendships.
Which one?
Yeah, which
this team
Which
at this
team,
table.
Rich?
This team at this table. You guys have been so good to me, and I forget how it first came about. Tom was instrumental in creating the name and letting me join.
Not to pile on, Rich, but this is our opportunity to talk about this, and it's one of the things that was not discussed previously. So I can't remember if it was a Christmas present or a birthday present.
This wasn't on your list.
I don't know if it was a Christmas present or birthday. I think it was Christmas, but either way, your birthday's close enough to Christmas that it falls in under the holiday umbrella. A few years back, I believe the three of us and Drew all chipped in to get Rich a Blu-ray player and an HDMI cable as well, so that he could hook
And some
it up.
Blu-rays.
And some Blu-rays. And Rich, where's that Blu-ray player now?
It's at my house. It's in great shape. It's
Mint
working
in
very
box.
Mint in box.
Is the wrapping paper still off of it? Or
well.
no?
I think so.
Because you have a habit of literally when we give you a gift, you halfway open it up, and you're like, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." The title might not even be completely exposed, and you just kind of leave it there. You don't, completely unwrap it and just discard the paper.
Yeah, what if it was like dirt? Like you start to unwrap it and you see Dirty Dancing, and you're like, "Great, I love Swayze, done." And you don't finish unwrapping it, and it's the sequel, Dirty Dancing Havana Nights. That'd be terrible.
It's quite the example.
What if?
What if? Well, I mean, what if it was Havana Nights?
I mean, I know that's a random example. All right, let's bring it more in line with our thing here. What if you open it and you see Star Wars, and you're like, "Oh, great, the original trilogy," and it's the prequels, and you never knew.
Or something that you might understand. What if you open it, it says Green Lantern, but then you peel down
Oh,
farther and it
you're
says like
being evil now.
Emerald Warriors or Mosaic.
Or the
You
movie.
know?
Or Earth
Or
2.
the movie.
Or Earth 2.
Or Earth 2. What if then?
The Green Lantern got the reaction.
Yeah, I should have led with that. I apologize. But so Rich does have this habit of only partially unwrapping. Once he sees what it is, or he thinks he sees what it is, he's done. But so the Blu-ray player is still just in the box, probably still somewhat wrapped. Why did you never set it up? And we had that same person who offered to host you at his house or in a hotel room.
Oh yeah.
Offered to come in and help you.
Is he like Voldemort? Are we just not saying his
No,
name?
it's Mike. It's Mike. It's Mike Sangorio.
Yeah, we could say his name. I don't know why I was.
He that is
dancing
not to
around.
be mentioned? That same guy.
Yeah, I mean, what's up, man?
What the hell, Rich?
And you're losing channels too.
I'm the ultimate procrastinator. I mean,
I think Rich made that up, though, about the CW. I don't think that's true.
Yeah.
I think he got
it is
tired.
true. It is true.
So, Rich, you said that you recently, you lost the CW, but not all the time. It's like only between 8 and 10. That's not true.
No. Between 8 and 8.
Well, but here's the
That's like when they're in
I'm
operation.
going to pile on Rich now too. So part of our Wednesday routine is I come to Paul's and I buy my books and then
And you give me a call.
and then I give Rich
Give
a
me
call.
a debrief call.
Yeah, and I tell him a little bit about what's come out this week and so forth. And we'll talk, about Flash. And there are times though where you'll be like, "Oh, did you see that last night with Barry and he was doing this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, but you don't have."
Oh, I get it through the internet.
Oh, okay. All right,
Busted.
good answer.
Yeah.
But what do you mean you get it through like you read an article about it, or you actually watch the episode?
I read an article about it.
But the firewall at work though.
Well, actually, now
That's
that I
only
got,
when he doesn't want to read the stuff that we sent him.
Yep,
pretty much
there you
it.
go. That's true. Yeah.
now they got an iPhone, I'm recharging this battery a lot.
It was from Mike and Sean. He reads it. It was from Anthony or I. Sorry, the firewall caught it.
How else is he going to get the itinerary for all the road trips we take?
That's true.
That is
That's
true. I don't know. This whole thing about you losing the CW during prime time. I don't know if I fully buy it, but
You're
it's
busted,
but it's
man.
It's okay. I think you just got tired of watching Flash or Arrow, but you didn't have the heart to tell us. Speaking of wrapping, when we give gifts to each other, we don't use regular wrapping paper. We used to use.
Yeah, that's gonna be tough.
It's becoming
The
a lot
AR
harder. We
bags.
used to use AR bags, and now they are in
and if
spare.
Spider
You
web
notice I
bag?
gave you the Batman
Yeah.
AR bags, which are a little bit older.
The vintage ones.
Yeah, I'm. I don't have as nice a art portfolio as Tom, or certainly not nearly as nice as Phil. But what I do have in my art portfolio is one of each of the different AR bags.
I gave you the Green
You gave me
Lantern.
the Green Lantern. I finally found the other one that I had at my parents' house.
Awesome.
So I've got 2 Green Lanterns and a couple Batmans, and then the Superman.
Is it weird going to other stores and not having backroom privileges, which I know sounds like a euphemism, but isn't? I'm really just referring to the ability to be able to go into the back room of the store.
It's definitely noticeably different when we watch a movie. When we go out to a movie, because it used to be we'd go out to a movie, you go out to dinner, and then there'd be a small group of us that would go back to the store after hours and sit there and hang out,
Drink beers.
drink beers, whatever, just hang out till all hours of the night. And to not have that access is tough. I mean, even tonight, while we're being graciously hosted, it's still
We're on a clock.
yeah, it's tough.
I mean, I think that's the thing. And, these couple of other stores in particular that we've mentioned, like Oh Yeah and Spider's Web, the guys who run them, Mark and Paul, could not have made me or us feel more welcome.
Mm.
I mean, absolutely 100%. But there's still that matter of like, it's just not our store. You know, as we wind down here, I guess there's one other idea that I just wanted to put forth, and I'm not saying I necessarily agree or disagree with it, but it was just something that I thought about. Because in both of Steve's episodes, he mentioned this idea of people kind of moving on from the store. And, you know, kind of all of us, as we've gotten engaged, married, had kids, jobs, moved, whatever, you know, a lot of people just weren't spending as much time at the store, myself included. I mean, even you, Sean, like you would work every other Saturday. You'd be there then.
I would come in Wednesdays and I worked every other Saturday. Yeah.
Right. But as far as like just pure hanging out at the store or doing those other things, I feel like for a lot of us, there was a little bit of a shift. But in any event, so Steve mentioned this a couple of times, and then we saw over those last months of the store, you know, how many of us, you know, offered to help and ultimately did help, and we had the huge dinner, and we saw people who hadn't been around in such a long time, and I mean, I did this podcast, which was my first, you know, creative project about the store in years, so I'm just kind of wondering, like, did we, I guess, as a group, like, take the store for granted, and along similar lines, you know, if that outpouring of support that we saw at the end had been consistent throughout, do you think the store still would have closed, or maybe things would have gone a little bit differently?
I guess I'll chime in first. I guess maybe you're right in thinking about it, that there was maybe a part of me that took it for granted, thinking, you know, it had been a staple since I was in late high school, early college. I've been, you know, started going there. So I think there was a part of me that was just sort of expecting it to always be there. That was never an issue really in my mind. It was just, that was a staple, and the hope would be one day my kids would get to work there, you know, and that would be when I would give up the Saturdays. You know, I'd give it up to Chris or Matt and then step back. But
Pass the baton.
Yeah, pass the baton.
I agree with that. But one of the other comments you made is all of this outpouring at the end. If these people had been more attentive consistently, I don't think that would have made a difference. I think Steve was at the point in his life where he was done. I think he invested a lot. It was 23 years. I think he was just done. He was willing to...
And I think that everybody was always consistently open to volunteer and help out. And
Yeah.
I don't think the end is what spurred, you know, people to say, oh, maybe I ought to start trying to help the store. I think that was something that was always there. It was you know, an unspoken thing.
Yeah. What about you, Tom? What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely took the store for granted. You know, granted that I wasn't as invested in, you know, what was inside physically, but, you know, what was there was my friends and being able to see my friends. And if I needed a place to go in between, you know, running errands, say hi to Steve, say hi to Jay, that wasn't there. Like this, you know, that Wednesday, that Tuesday, that Saturday, it was nothing. There was nothing there. There's nothing that I could go back to. So, you know, to say we took it for granted, I think we did.
One of the ideas that I had for this podcast special that I abandoned was to do the AR version of A Christmas Carol, where like I was gonna like write like a whole play, and then I was like, this is too much work. But like Steve would be Scrooge, I think Jay Mizell would be Jacob Marley, Tom would be Tiny Tom. I mean, the name works. Except instead of like God bless us everyone, it would be a different version from you. I'm
Go
sure.
fuck yourself.
Eat shit.
You guys would be, you know, like maybe a couple of the ghosts.
Actually, it's got some merit.
It's not too late.
Maybe next holiday special. You know, really thank you to all of you for doing this. It was great to have the team back. I want to give a quick shout out to Acme Comics. They're a comic book shop in North Carolina, and they have their own podcast called Acme Cast. And they very graciously had me on as a guest shortly after the first season of This Wrapped. We had a great conversation. They had listened to all of the episodes. It was really great. And they kind of planted the seed in my head of doing sort of a special to bridge the seasons of this podcast. So I want to thank that crew and encourage listeners of this podcast to check out Acme Cast. To all of our listeners, I hope everyone has a happy and healthy and safe holiday. Stay tuned. There will be news about the future of this podcast. There will be more of my comic shop history coming your way in 2016. And until then, don't be a flat squirrel.